Hello there ladies, gentlemen and all variations thereupon. Recently an unfortunate thing happened and my bag broke whilst I was using it. Now, being a good sustainably conscious maker, I decided to repair the bag, which I did, and it worked for a little bit longer. But the material that the bag is made out of is what they call a vegan leather. In other words, it's a plastic, and plastics, while they live in the environment for a long time, don't necessarily maintain their useful life for as long. Now, this bit of misfortune has presented itself also as an opportunity, because it means that in making a new bag I get to experiment a bit and create something that's very different from anything you might get on the market, and I get to build it in such a way that it fits my lifestyle perfectly. What's this bag got to have? It's got to be big enough in order to be able to contain everything I normally carry with me, so that's going to be things like wallet, keys, a book, sonic screwdriver, map of Middle Earth, spare notebook, any tools that I might want to use, and have enough space in there so that if I was to say go down the shop or something and pick up a bottle of milk on the way home from work or something, then I'll be able to put that in my bag and it will be able to carry that weight. The other thing that I want to try and build into this is more of an ergonomic design. You see, the human body is designed to be able to carry weight close to its centre of mass. You like to hold things close to yourself rather than out at a distance. It's better to have it on a shoulder or with the weight pressed over the hip. The hip is the best one because imagine if you were carrying a toddler, you would have them sit on your hip. It's what we naturally do in order to carry a weight. So ideally what I want is a bag that's going to sit with the majority of the weight on my hip and close to the centre of mass. Also, I want within the bag separate areas for my book, my keys, my wallet, my phone, and maybe in something else. The reason being that these are the things that I'm constantly trying to get access to, and if I have to keep digging around and rooting around in my bag in order to get them, you know, that's frustrating. And aside from all of those considerations, the final thing is it needs to be sustainable and long lasting. So leather is a long lasting material, and once it reaches the end of its life, this will just rot away. I don't have to worry about it being around in the environment. The outside of the bag is going to be made from linen with a coarser linen for a lining on the inside so that it looks nice and presentable, but also is biodegradable, so I don't have to worry about it once it comes to the end of its life. But hopefully the end of its life should be far down the road, because I'm going to try and construct this so that the seams hold together, and linen is a strong fabric in itself, so it should be able to take quite a lot of weight without tearing. So what have I got so far? Well, I've got this strip of leather, which is just waste leather from where I've cut belts off before. As you can see, it already curves up around this end, so this is going to be the end where I'm going to put the bag on. And why does it need to be curved? Well, that's part of the experimental nature of this design. I'm going to try and construct a bag that slightly curves around the side of my body. The idea being that when I've got it on my shoulder, the weight will push down over my hip more directly, allowing me to carry large weights for longer periods of time, because it's supported in the same way that a toddler would be supported if I were carrying it around. This though does mean that the calculations for it are going to be slightly more complicated, because I'm going to have to calculate the curve of my body, and my body doesn't necessarily always maintain that same curve. At the moment, just after Christmas, this bit sticks out a little bit more than it normally does. In fact, these jeans are a little bit tighter than I remember. But in the summertime, when I'm trying to get the beach body ready, then I'm sure this will be pulled in a little bit more. I hope it will anyway. So I need to be able to account for that and not fit it too tightly to me. The other thing to keep in mind is that my body is not symmetrical on this axis, so it sticks out more this way and has a softer curve there, and it's more harsh this side. So I need to take into account that when I'm sketching it on. So without further ado, let's start sketching on the shape based on measurements I've already taken. Right, so after measuring my body front to back, I want the entire length of the bag on the inside curve to rest about 15 centimetres in. So let me do a quick mark at the edge where the 15 centimetre is on the inside curve, and we're going to go slightly larger than this overall. So that's the absolute minimum. In terms of the high point of the curve, we want it at the 12 centimetre mark. So we have here the entire length of the bag and the high point, so this is directly over my hip, and this is my stomach sticking out in front. This is the back. So Adding on to this, let's do the rest of the inner curve along there. Depth of the bag, which is how much space I want on the inside, I want about 5 centimetres, which is going to bring it to about here. Get slightly narrower towards the outer edges, and then take the French curve and draw the general shape of that. And have that as the basic shape of the bottom of the bag. So it's not going to be a huge bag, but it's got enough space in there so that I could fit a good many things into it. So let's get this cut out now. So one thing you may notice is that I don't have all of the leatherworking equipment. For example, when I was beveling the edges, I was having to use a knife rather than an edge beveler, and I don't have like a 3-hole punch in order to do the holes for the stitching. Instead, I'm going to have to use an awl and do each hole individually, and use this little spiky wheelie contraption, which is the technical term for it, in order to make sure my spaces are even. So if I can get this to work without all the equipment, then it shows that you don't actually need all the equipment to get it to work. So I've beveled the edges of this just to try and neaten it up a little bit. I've wet the whole thing, even though I originally just wet the edges, because if you just wet the edges then you can leave watermarks on there. So now that I've beveled the edges, I've wet the whole thing as well, just to get it to soak through. And next I'm going to be creating this sort of a stitch line so I know where to cut, and then I'm going to be poking through all of the holes for the stitching. Once that's done, then I'm basically done with the level work. So that was a nice quick easy part of the build. But one of the other things we're going to do is consider how this is going to be placed on the ground. I don't want to be placing the leather directly onto the floor when I'm working or doing something else, or visiting a restaurant or something. So what I need to do is attach little feet to it. I don't actually have feet. What I do have though are these little studs. These are the sort of like rivets that you'll get on jeans in order to hold things together. So what I'm going to do is punch some holes and put some rivets in there so that when I place the bag on the floor, it will rest on the rivets rather than on the leather. Just to keep the leather off the ground a little bit and protect the bag a little bit longer, give it that little bit more life than it would otherwise have. Right, so with that last bit of leather work, I am basically done until I need to stitch on the side panels, which are going to be made out of this. Now, normally when I do sewing, I like to be as efficient as possible, and I have generally large blocks of colours that I just try and get as many panels out of a smaller piece of fabric as possible. With something like this where it's patterned, I need to try and match the pattern a bit so I can't be as efficient. So what I need to do first is decide exactly what section of the fabric I'm going to be using. So taking those measurements I made earlier, as well as knowing that I want this bag to be about 20 centimetres tall once it gets to the strap, so from the base to the strap, so I'm going to need slightly more than that, allowing for seam allowance. I'm going to measure out what sort of panels I'm going to get from it. Primarily the larger outside panel is going to be the one shown to the world. The smaller inside panel doesn't matter as much because it's going to be pressed against me most of the time. It's going to be 40 centimetres visible, which I think if I were to take this section of pattern at the front here, that's about 40 centimetres. So it would just clip off the very edge of that. So if I go out to seam allowance, I need to add on both sides, because otherwise the seam allowance will start covering one side of the fabric. It's me to 50 and 50. So that's going to be the front panel, which is going to be the one shown to the world. Then I need one that's going to sit behind. It's going to be roughly the same sort of thing, but on a smaller scale. So it's going to be 25 centimetres wide. So 25 centimetres tall by 25 wide. It's going to be about a square. So I'm going to take basically this bit down here, carrying on from there so I can be at least somewhat efficient. Because this is linen, if you want to do it perfectly straight, what you can do is just pull out a single thread going along and use that as a guide to cut. I'm not going to do that in this instance because I have a visual printed on pattern that I'm going to go by. The rest of this can be used for things like external detailing if I want to do that, or the strap that's going to attach along the top. So I'll have this same bit here. Internal fabric lining is going to be out of this material, and I think there is just enough here for me to be able to do the lining. So this is going to be used as a lining, but the lining does need to be slightly larger. So what I need to do is make sure that I have this extra length on this when I cut this out on the panels of this, so that I can sew them together and make a bottom that's going to rest across the leather on the inside. That way, when I put things in, the weight will be taken primarily by the leather at the bottom rather than the lining. The lining will only take the weight of whatever's in the pockets at the side, and I will use this same material to create the pockets, although I probably could use this as well if I wanted to cut out some interesting patterning parts and use them as the pockets on the interior. Haven't decided which of those I'm going to get. So before we progress any further, let's recap what I've got so far. I have a strap which I've cut to 70 centimetres long, which is way longer than I need, but I wanted some extra wiggle room on it, and as you see, I turn that inside out by sewing two parts together, doing a flip. So that's going to be sewn across the top and is at the moment separate. I have the outer layers still inside out and sewn together. So we've got the front section that's going to be shown to the world, and the back section is going to sit against me, back section being smaller. We have the inner lining, which has already got I've put a pin in the bottom so I know which side's the bottom. I've got the pockets already sewn in, and the pockets have been done out of the nicer fabric with the print on it. So that'll be the section for the book, and I've got one for keys, one for wallet, one for phone on the opposite side. Now when it comes to attaching the outside to this piece of leather, I can't get my pins in through the leather and through this, and my sewing machine is not going to be able to sew it. So it's going to have to be done by hand. And in order to attach it, because I can't get my pins through, well, not easily without making obvious holes, I'm going to tape it down using a little bit of easily removable tape. And we're going to tape it so that the wrong side of this, so the outside, the bit that you're going to be shown to the world, is going to be folded over and pasted to the bit of this leather that is going to be the inside, so it will run along the inside of that. And so there we have it, a very ergonomic bag. The thing about this bag though is because it's curved, it kind of creates an optical illusion. You see, humans are incredibly bad at judging a three-dimensional volume. That's why people don't realise how much bigger a large drink is than a medium drink, because we're very bad at judging 3D volume. This, it's doubly so, because it's curved, so you never actually get the full idea of how long it is. For example, if I open it up, let's see exactly how much I've managed to fit in here. Firstly, there's the book, my Captain Marvel purse, notebook. This one contains the map of Middle Earth in the back. Second notebook, my wallet. That's a bit loose in there, so I'm going to need some extra folding money to go in with it. I need to make sure I actually get some of that. My glasses case, my sonic screwdriver, a pen, and in this pocket, keys, and finally, my phone. Now, my wallet, my keys, my phone and the book all have their own individual pockets, so I don't need to rummage around trying to find them, although the keys then did get a bit stuck underneath another pocket, so that might be something I need to look into. There are, however, a few mistakes that I've made. For example, I have sewn this strap on the wrong way around on one of the sides, so it has a permanent twist into it. It's not very noticeable, and I can't really be bothered to fix it, even though it's a really simple fix. The second thing I did wrong, even though I'm pretty sure I said it the correct way around when I was talking to camera, is that I sewed this on the wrong way around. So when I flipped it, even though this is the side that I wanted exposed, I've sewn the fabric on the outside here, which means I've lost a tiny little bit of space, but also now the fabric's going to be resting on the ground whenever I put it down. It is a slightly larger issue because I'd spent a lot of time on the leather making sure that the part that was going to be facing outward was going to have that beautiful stitch line along the outside, but it took so long to stitch on by hand and it was so awkward, and I did stab myself with a needle a couple of times, so I don't think I'm going to be fixing that anytime soon because I'm just done with doing that for a little bit. I've also got another leather stitching project that's sitting just over there, and yeah, so I don't really want to be redoing that one and then moving on to that one, so it's just going to stay the way it is, and it doesn't really matter too much. I've not lost that much space. Now that everything is back in the bag, you'll remember that I said that one of the things I wanted from this bag was it to be big enough that I could go down the shops and pick up something like a bottle of milk on my way home. Now I know what you're thinking, that doesn't look anywhere near big enough to fit one of those big 2-litre bottles of milk that you normally buy in, so maybe I could fit 1 litre in there and just not do it up. Well, remember what I said about optical illusions? 2-litre bottle of milk. I'll move the side screwdriver up. It does fit in there and it fits under my arm. Now obviously I can't zip that up, but if I was walking home from work, which is normally when I pick up the milk when I realise that I actually need one, then I can just buy the milk, stick it in my bag and then just finish walking home. It's not that big a deal. I might get a little bit of a cold armpit if it doesn't sit right under there, but I can fit a 2-litre bottle of milk in. That means there is plenty of space in this bag for me, and it fits all between my hip and my shoulder. And whilst I am filming this outro on the next day, I did actually manage to film all of this in one day. So this was a 1-day make, but the camera ran out of power as I was doing the zip, so you don't see all as 1 day because this outro is the next day. So it was 1-day make. And while I go put this milk back, then maybe you want to watch this video where I make a bag with designs from the Staffordshire Hoard. Or if that's not your speed, then this video has been picked out by the algorithm just for you. Oh, and if you click this face up here, then you can subscribe. Yeah, that's what YouTubers say.